Love this country, love this city, New York's country, 94.7. The perfect place for the two people sitting in front of me to have their kickoff book tour here in New York City. We've got Tim McGraw and Jon Meacham, the co-authors of Songs of America. Welcome, fellas.
Good to see you. Thanks for having us.
It's kind of like the Grammys meets the Pulitzers.
Sort of, yeah.
Sounds like the Star Wars bar scene, actually, but thank you.
You're both trophy husbands, that's for sure.
That's exactly right.
You've each had trophies in your respective fields, and now you've come together to create this really special book. It really is so special.
Thank you.
I like it because you can digest a lot or a little. It's the perfect Father's Day gift.
I agree with you, for sure.
Hint. And what you do is you tell the story of America through music. And on a personal level, I mean, I just think of my own life, and the minute you hear that song on the radio, it takes you back to that time where you were in your life. And it kind of works that way for America.
It sure does. And for me, that was, of course, I was a big fan of Jon's for a long time. And when I was reading his book,
we're testing that right from day to day.
It keeps getting, the boundaries are getting pushed. But that was my thought process as well. Reading Jon's books and reading his last book, Soul of America, and thinking about the moments that music has played a part in your own life on a personal level, and then how when you expand that out to the inflection points in our history. You got to think that music had played a role in that, and Jon and I got to talking about that one day.
Yeah. This is all McGraw's fault. He asked the question that started this, which is, had I ever thought about the role music played in all the eras that I've written about? And I really hadn't. And one of the things that goes exactly to your point is a republic is the sum of its parts. And so our hearts and minds matter enormously, not just the president, not just the members of Congress, not just judges, but all of us, because we are the collective we the people. And so music has both shaped us, it's mirrored us, and whether it's Revolutionary War music or an anti-war song in 1917 or We Shall Overcome or Nina Simone singing Mississippi Goddam or Lee Greenwood and Bruce Springsteen kind of representing different parts of the 1980s, you can really tell the story of the country through its music.
Of course, you're an author, a biographer, you're a visiting professor.
That's why I don't have to go to meetings.
At Vanderbilt. So how'd you guys meet? Did y'all bump into each other at the Piggly Wiggly on West End Avenue?
Do you remember Bewitched?
Yes.
Remember Mrs. Kravitz?
Yeah.
Tim is like...
Mrs. Stevens!
Yeah,
Mrs. Stevens!
Yeah. McGraw wanders around the neighborhood knocking on the door.
It's like I'm like the nerd trying to hang out with the cool guys. So I go beat on Jon's door, and he and Will are smoking cigars in the backyard, and they let me hang out for a little while.
Nice. Yeah. And that's how he presented the idea, and here you are.
He did. It's a great question. And look, we're at a moment where nobody's really happy politically. Everybody's ready to fight. No matter what it is, right? It's a perpetual struggle. And I think one of the things this does, and I think we both found this, is when you go back, you realize, A, it's always been complicated, and B, we've always come through it. Mm-hmm. So what is it that we can learn from that past that can arm us for the present?
And to your point earlier, I think, I remember we actually lost friends over a political argument.
Sure.
And I ran into the husband at a coffee shop, and I said, and Bob, you just fired it right back up. I'm like, Bob, I don't care. I don't care about I care about this.
Yeah.
Like, I think people forget that. We can only control so much, but it is that person to person.
It is person to person, and looking in the mirror, and looking at yourself, and then what can you do for yourself and your family, and what can you teach your kids, and then what can your kids go out into the world and take with them?
Yeah, it's a stress test. Right now where we are, it's a stress test for citizenship and for grace.
That's a great way to put it.
And I wrote a book about the senior President Bush, whom we lost last year. And one of the last things we did is we listened to Humble and Kind. I played it for him because he was the guy who said, we need a kinder, gentler nation. And people kind of poked fun at him 35 years ago for that. But, McGraw's song made the point in a powerful and evocative way that a little humility, a little kindness is going to go a long way.
Speaking of that, as you look at now, I do believe that's one of the songs that will stand the test of time. And Songs of America, Volume 500, 100 years from now, I do think that's indicative of what we're striving for.
I'm going to say something nice about McGraw, so hopefully he won't listen.
We're recording this,
but it's amazing, and it speaks to this perennial struggle we have between our worst instincts and our better angels. And we don't do any service to ourselves or to the past by being sentimental about it, right? The world was not perfect before you lost the last presidential election, or you won it, right? And perfection can't be the goal. It has to be a more perfect union.
That's well put.
Absolutely. I mean, when you start looking at these songs and you look back through history and some of the first song that we talk about in this book really is the Liberty Song that one of our founding fathers, John Dickinson, wrote. And to me, you start thinking about protest music, and you think about protest music, everybody gets caught up in the 60s protest music, right? And it's also what I remember the most, because John and I both grew up in the early 70s when we first started really paying attention to music. And that's the music that really made me understand that music has more than just entertainment. Music speaks to you, and it causes you to reflect, and it causes you to look at your society and look at your neighborhoods and look at what's going on in the world around you. And you go all the way back to the Liberty Song, and that's what they were doing. I mean, he wrote, there's a verse that he wrote in the Liberty Song, John Dickinson wrote, that our children shall inherit the fruits of our pain. And to have that sort of view in 1768, 8 years before the Declaration of Independence was written, and we declared our independence from Britain and started the Revolutionary War, so to speak, to have that sort of view of what this country could become and what it would mean for future generations is pretty remarkable to me. And then when you start hearing the protest music of the 60s, it instantly draws me right back to the Liberty Song. There's a direct line and a direct correlation to me. And what was interesting to me about this book, as much as anything, learning the history and getting back involved in the stuff that you learned in high school and in college that you forget about, was the arc of, and the rise and the arc of the American songwriter and how it became a uniquely American music, which started with writing lyrics over old English melodies that already existed.
My Country 'Tis of Thee,
absolutely,
yeah.
And then turned into this sort of unique art form to America and the way we wrote songs.
Every time the Queen walks up, I'm like, that's our song.
That's right.
Yeah.
Woman.
Well, think about the Battle Hymn of the Republic for a second. Is that a patriotic song? Absolutely. Written by Julia Ward Howe in one night down at the Willard Hotel in Washington. But it's also a protest song, because she's infusing the Union cause with emancipation. And we sing it now at moments of great defiance and national, both celebration and crisis. But that's a song that will also stand the test of time, a hymn, and it was a poem, and they borrowed a melody that had been about abolition called John Brown's Body. And when Abraham Lincoln heard it the first time, he had a very quick reaction: sing it again. So he hit replay. If you go back to the Depression, 1932, Happy Days Are Here Again, right? The FDR song. But one of the biggest songs of that era was Bing Crosby's version of Brother, Can You Spare a Dime?
Oh.
That's a bleak song of alienation. Here's a World War I veteran who's on a breadline through no power of his own. He says, look, we built bridges, we built the buildings, and now, brother, can you spare a dime? So which vision do you want? Do you want the uplifting vision, or do you want the more jaundiced one? And that's true at every era.
I love your all's chemistry. It's so good.
Well, can I just say for the record, I was misinformed.
Yeah.
I thought this was a thing with faith. And then
stuck with me
and then
now.
he showed up, and it was a little disappointing.
Tim McGraw and Jon Meacham. The book is Songs of America, Patriotism, Protest, and the Music That Made the Nation. You guys covered some of the songs you address in the book. You take the history part. You take kind of the musical perspective, Tim. How do you pick which songs when you're going from pre-Revolutionary War to basically the election of Barack Obama? I mean, that's a big span of time.
It's a big span of time, and I think we talk about probably 160-something songs. But that's just scratching the surface. There are so many songs out there, and I think what I would hope that this book would do is inspire people to go back and find these songs and discover these songs and listen to these songs, and then dig deeper and find the other songs, too, that really spoke to the time and the places that we talk about in this book and the eras. Because when you hear music and you look at some of these songs and you start thinking, what was the consciousness that was going on in the world or in our country at that time? And it really puts you music can inform us of what's going on, and it can also cause us to move forward in a different way as well. So music has such a reflective quality about it, and when you see some of these things, it really, I think it makes you reflect on just the turmoil that our nation has gone through, but also the hope that we have as a nation, and the hope that always drives us forward.
And it's very
and that
painful,
always shows up in the music.
It's very painful for me to say this as a prose guy, but you can hear a song with more of an open mind and an open heart than you could read a book or hear a speech, right? You can listen, even if you're a pro-Vietnam, Richard Nixon was framed, Hawk. You can listen to Bob Dylan, Peter, Paul and Mary, Pete Seeger, and think, you know what, this was amazing. Nina Simone, you know what, this is amazing music. I disagree with it, but you're in a more of a collective conversation than if you're just in a political debate. And the
That's
country's
probably
about
fair.
debate.
Yeah.
The country's about debate. It's about dissent. But music has more of a capacity to create a common conversation than most of what I do most of the time.
Speaking of that, I love vintage stuff, and the photos in the book are crazy. I had no idea Richard Nixon played the Grand Ole Opry.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
It's the only
cool
place
stuff.
you could go and not get yelled at in 1974.
Did they tape it?
It was, well, you know, and of course Nixon was a clumsy guy. And in fact, they used to put tape around the military medals he'd put on because he would stab the person he would be putting on. So they would be wounded more in the East Room of the White House than they were in Vietnam. And so Roy Acuff gave him a yo-yo, and it was like impeachment. I mean, it was just god-awful.
The writing was on the wall.
Exactly.
So tonight you'll be at Beacon Theater performing. It's your first stop on a 7-city tour, and you're going to talk like we're talking here, and also you'll perform some songs, Tim.
Yeah.
You said there are 160 songs in the book.
We're not doing 160 songs.
How do you figure out which songs you'll perform?
Well, what we tried to do is put together something that spoke to the book, but what we really wanted to do is sort of in between the lines, not necessarily the book. We wanted to give you sort of an overreaching arc of
liner
what
notes.
The book, liner notes, yeah, exactly. And I tried to hit songs that sort of progress the story along and progress the narrative along. I mean, we don't hit every part of it, but we get pretty close. And you know, there's a few songs that we do too that aren't necessarily in the book, but informed me and informed our writing of the book as well. So it's going to be pretty interesting. For me, the most fun thing for me is to sit and listen to John talk, because I'm such a huge fan of his, and it makes me feel smarter being around him. And that, you know, when somebody can do that, you like them instantly, whether you like looking at them or not. You can like listening to them.
Yeah. And I'm going to be doing spearfishing lessons.
We're going to talk about the spearfishing.
In a tank out in the lobby.
Wait for that, John. Now, are you going to sing backup tonight?
My daughter pointed something out to me this very morning. I was listening to one of the showstopper moments is Tim sings his great song, If You're Reading This, which is an amazing song. And I was playing it for my 14-year-old, who clearly needs more respect for her father, as the following sentence will reveal. And I sort of hit one part of it, and I sort of sang two or three words. And she said, you know, Daddy, I love you, but it's not just that you weren't given a musical gift. Someone took it away. You have an act.
Kind of sounds like you.
Here's a quote.
I mean, I
think you have an active deficit. So no, I will not be. And I got to stop off. I'm glad to be here because I got to go up to Brooks Brothers and see if I can get a cowboy hat.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure that'll be at Brooks Brothers, John.
They don't have them there?
And some gym workout clothes too from Brooks Brothers.
Tim McGraw, Jon Meacham, tonight, right around the corner from me at Beacon Theater, so I'll definitely be there. Tickets are still available. In the notes of the book, you mention that this is just the opening of the conversation. Yeah. It's not the closing. And it's that conversation that we're having right now about the nation's diversity and complexity. And that's why I think it's perfect that you're doing this here in the most wildly diverse city in America, where country music is killing it, by the way.
Absolutely.
All right.
You know what I'm saying?
Bravo.
Tim knows our people.
Yeah.
Rocky Top.
That leaves a lot open, right? It leaves a lot open for great discussions. It leaves more volumes for Songs of America.
That's a good idea.
And also leaves the opening for maybe Tim or you to run for office. Who's it going to be?
It's not going to be me.
It's not going to be me. No.
Wow.
I am fundamentally hopeful about the life of the nation unless I ran for office, and that would be it. That would do it.
Well, you know, Look, I think that that I've said this before, and John just articulated a little bit, that hope is always there for us, and our country is a great country, and we have a lot of great citizens and great people, and it starts with our process of being involved and caring about our country and our government and our fellow man. And I think that this book to me is sort of our way of sort of broaching those subjects and introducing you to some stuff that is like a balm, I think, in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. Music can be that.
Mm-hmm.
And a reminder that we shouldn't be quite so frustrated if we know that it was hard in the past. Why should we pretend that somehow or another the past was easier? Mm-hmm. Rosa Parks didn't think so. John Lewis didn't think so. 1968, 47 Americans died every day in Vietnam. A day. So, 50 years ago, Dr. King was killed. Senator Kennedy was killed just this week. The Democratic National Convention goes up in flames. George Wallace wins 13.5% of the vote. I know this is divided. I know it's tough. I know people in New York City. I lived here for a long time. My vote is never counted in a presidential election because I lived here and in Tennessee. So it's just one side or the other. I'm just there. But it's got to be a conversation because the framers set this up, that we would debate and argue and disagree, but we would do it under one roof.
You promise? Because I feel like when I was growing up, people didn't argue the way they argue now.
Well,
really?
I don't feel like it.
Well,
remember Ollie North?
It's probably louder.
Remember Watergate?
Oh, yeah, that's true.
It's probably louder.
Presidents resigned.
Maybe now. I think
maybe it's
social
maybe
media
it's uglier
has a
now.
lot to do with it, I think, in a lot of ways, for sure.
It's in your pocket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's in your phone. It's in your face. That's true. But that's a difference of degree, not kind.
You're right. And that's why songs become such a universal message, whether they're written before the Revolutionary War or today.
And that's what you realize, too, when you go back and look, and then the process of writing this and rediscovering some of this music, and certainly rediscovering a lot of the history. As you look back now and you see this, certainly songs of the 60s, where we were talking about earlier, and you think, look how this music is remembered. Look how these artists are remembered, and look how they reflect upon the times that we lived in. And you go all the way up to Springsteen, God bless, Born in the USA, and Lee Greenwood, God bless the USA, the dichotomy of those songs. Mm-hmm. However, it's easy to get lost in the anthemic verse of God bless, Born in the USA, and want to wave your flag. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you got to pay attention to what the song's saying.
Yeah.
And what the flag, what is the nature of the nation under where the flag is flying.